slides up on the screen. You'll have to let me know if that has worked. Can you all see them?
Yes, we can see them.
Can you see my presenter notes or just the slides?
We can't see your notes. It's all good.
Okay, amazing. Always worth checking. Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Jo Lunnan. I am the Future Pupil Programme Coordinator at the University of Law, which is quite a mouthful, but basically just means that I did the bar course at the University of Law 2 years ago now, which is quite a scary statement because it feels like yesterday. And I am starting pupillage with 1 Crown Office Row Chambers in October 2025. So I've got a nice little interim year, and in that interim year, I'm working for ULaw to basically talk to lovely people like yourselves about the bar course, funding, mini pupillages, Inns of Court, pupillage applications, scholarships, interviews, things like that. So before I do sort of dive in, and hopefully give you kind of a brief overview of becoming a barrister, I will say feel free to make a note of my email address or add me on LinkedIn if you have any questions that you want to ask me kind of after today, or you want any information, or you want possibly any advice with an application. Yeah, feel free to make a note of that. It will be on the slide at the end as well, and just let me know. I will also quickly encourage you, if you're interested in learning more from ULaw about, for example, our application deadlines for the bar course, events we're running. We run a mock trial, which I will be writing, but haven't yet, next term, competitions, course information, things like that. Do scan the QR code that's on the screen. Again, it will come up on the end, but it just gives you a little form to fill in so that you can hear any relevant bar-related information from us. So yeah, very briefly, what I will go over today are things like what is a barrister? Because definitely this is not something that I had a clear idea about when I was starting out, and it's also something that a lot of my close friends and family still don't really understand. So it's worth going over routes to the bar, roles and skills of a barrister. I won't be going over the Inns of Court today because I think Jess is going to do a fantastic job with that. And pupillages and mini pupillages, and then the bar course. So it'll be a really brief overview. I'll go through quite quickly, but hopefully, and I think I'll send the slides through as well to Lydia after this, so you should be able to get all the information after the day as well. Very briefly, I just want to encourage you to think about studying the bar course at the University of Law if you do decide to become a barrister. I'm not going to read all the things on the screen now and trust that you can do it. But what I do want to highlight is the careers team at ULaw genuinely is fantastic. You can access them from the day you accept your place up until I think about 6 years after you leave. I used them to help me get pupillage this year, even though I'd left. They're fantastic. They gave me basically weekly guidance. I'm sure I wouldn't have got pupillage without them. They did mock interviews, looked at my applications, looked at my CV. They did everything. So that's the fantastic resource that ULaw have. And actually, in addition to the careers team, ULaw also employ 2 current future pupils. So the FPPC, and the Future Pupil Employability Coordinator, who are also people that have just gone through the bar course more recently, and pupillage applications more recently, who are there as kind of a point of contact throughout the course and can support you with applications and give any advice as well. So yeah, what is a barrister? Apologies if some of you know this, you might well, but I definitely didn't while I was doing my undergrad degree. So I always think it's helpful to give a brief overview. The best way to do that is kind of to look at what a barrister is not, which is a solicitor. So kind of looking at some of the differences between those 2 roles. Obviously, if you've watched Suits and things like that, you will know that in a lot of countries, being a lawyer is just sort of one full role. There aren't solicitors and barristers, there are attorneys, but in the UK, we have split specialist roles. I think it's interesting that there are around, I'm going to say this number wrong, but 209,000 solicitors in England and Wales, but only 17,000 practicing barristers. So nearly 20 times as many solicitors as barristers currently. which is perhaps why the bar can be seen as slightly a more competitive professional route. There are fewer spots available to train and work, but it's also seen as a more niche and perhaps specialised career as well. So briefly going over the differences, solicitors are employed. They often will be employed in an office with a kind of clear hierarchical structure. The defined career path. So you go from solicitor to associate to senior associate to partner, and if you're fantastic, to senior partner, which I'm sure you guys all are. In terms of the work differences between solicitor and barrister, it can actually be described quite well by using a kind of GP/surgeon analogy. So solicitors are a little bit more like GPs. They're involved with the client, they listen to a client's problems, they diagnose the problem. If the client needs any specialist help, like with a trial or a specialist legal opinion, then they'll then pass it over to the surgeon, the barrister, who can offer that slightly more specialised side of things. Solicitors can get training funded if you get a training contract or qualifying work experience in a law firm as well. And they work as part of a team. There's definitely a big teamwork aspect of working as a solicitor in the way there isn't if you're a barrister, because you'd be working with paralegals, co-workers, partners, other solicitors. But barristers lead really quite independent professional lives. You might be led, which means you have a senior barrister in court with you, or you might have a junior, which means you are the senior barrister. But on the whole, you are self-employed, and therefore kind of there's less of a team feel. So looking at what barristers do, as I say, they are self-employed, which means that we do lack some of the really lovely things that you can see in brackets on the solicitor tab, things like parental leave pay, sick pay, fixed holidays, things like that, no pension as well, and no fixed salary. But if you're a barrister, you do get to direct your own practice, you get to manage your own clients, you don't have a boss. So it's much more in your hands, the way that you want to run your career, and that's something that really appealed to me. If you're a barrister, you will be you might be a member of chambers. Actually, I should mention there are employed barristers. I think only 20% of barristers are employed. So that's where you might be working in a legal team for a company, but it's quite rare. Yes, and barristers are members of chambers, which are not really like a law firm, because you have individual barristers with individual workloads that sort of belong to the same premises, basically. However, the type and size of chambers that you do belong to can determine the type and level of work that you get. And that is because the clerks attached to that chambers will manage your workload, your admin, they'll source cases for you. So they're really important when you're building your practice as a junior barrister. So you really good to have a fantastic relationship with them. Barristers move up and down the country a lot to go to different courts for work. This is more if you're a criminal barrister, but nonetheless is true generally. It's partly why I really need to get my driver's license. And as I say, the work you do is a lot more specialised. So some King's Counsel, which are very senior barristers, usually only work on a very specific type of cases within their practice area. And of course, there's loads of advocacy for barristers, things that you might have seen in TV shows or yourself in court, witness handling, cross-examination, things like that. But also written advocacy, like writing advices or speeches as well. There are some common misconceptions about the bar. A big one is that you'll be in court all the time. It really depends on the area of law. If you're a civil barrister, you actually won't be in court all that often. And it also depends on the area, the point in your career that you're at. If you're junior, you might be spending more time in court. Whereas if you're a little bit more senior, you might be doing more work in chambers. Barristers do often do the same jobs as solicitors, particularly given that there are now loads of higher court advocates, so solicitors who basically are able to advocate in court. Not all barristers wear wigs and gowns, only criminal barristers do, and sometimes if there's a child witness or a vulnerable witness, they might not. And definitely all barristers do not do the same job or earn the same amount of money. There is a very large spectrum on that. So it's worth, if you know that there's an area of law that you're interested in, just having a quick look at what life at the bar in that area of law might look like. So that's a very brief overview of what a barrister is. And I will talk now a little bit about routes to the bar. I think Jess might also be touching on this. So I will do it briefly. Oh, sorry. I've gone past it. So there are sort of a couple of things that you really need to become a barrister. The first is an academic component. So that's either a qualifying law degree or a non-law degree and a conversion course. So either the PGDL or an MA law. That is what I did. I didn't do a law degree. I did Latin and Greek at Bristol and then did the law conversion, which I absolutely loved. It's quite an intense year where the key topics from a 3-year law degree are kind of taught across 1 year. But I absolutely fell in love with law, which sounds very nerdy, but it's true, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think having not done a law degree I was kind of worried that it would help me when it came to hinder me when it came to applying for pupillage. But actually, I think it gave me lots of really helpful skills that I wouldn't otherwise have had. So you need that. And then you need the vocational component, which is now gone, which is, I don't know, sorry, my slides are being funny. Basically, the vocational component is the bar course, which you might have heard referred to as the BPT or the BPTC or the BPC. All of them are the bar course. It is the same thing, ultimately. And once you finish the bar course, you'll be called to the bar, at which point you are a barrister, but you're not qualified to practice. So to become qualified, you need to do pupillage, which is 1 year, which I'll touch on in more detail in a minute. And once you've done that, you're a fully fledged barrister and you can practice yourself and hopefully you'll go on to get tenancy. I do want to quickly stress that there is no one right route to the bar. Obviously, you need your academic component, your vocational component, and pupillage. But I know people who've had full-on careers before coming to the bar who are very successful, or who did the bar course straight out of uni. There is no one correct route in the same way that there is no one correct mold of what a barrister should be. So just thinking about the kind of skills that you would need to have to be a barrister, or that you might already have that mean that you'll be a fantastic barrister. The roles of a barrister kind of shape the skills that you need. So the key ones are witness handling, which, as I say, you've probably seen before on TV shows, things like cross-examination, examination in chief, that kind of thing. You'll do more of that if you're a criminal barrister. In fact, you'll do it most days, but you definitely will if you're a civil barrister as well. Appearing in court in front of judges and juries and advocating for your client, drafting opinions. So a solicitor might ask your advice on a really niche area of law and you can give your opinion on that, having hopefully done lots of research. Negotiating settlements. So if you think that, or if your client is keen to avoid a trial, helping come to a kind of settlement conclusion that works for all parties. And reviewing evidence. So do you think the bar is right for you? Here is just some of the skills that make a good barrister. I also want to stress that you absolutely don't need all of these in equal measure. I don't think anybody has all of these in equal measure. Maybe some of you do. I certainly don't. But it's kind of a good idea to start thinking about the sort of things that you might want to be working on or thinking about when it comes to drafting applications eventually in the future. The first kind of key skill is intellectual ability. You do need to be able to think on your feet, be logical, analytical, adapt and change argument in the moment. All of this is really important. And if you do have good grades, a good module grade, good A-levels, things like that, it's going to really help you to put on your applications. But you absolutely don't need the highest first in your cohort. You don't need an Oxbridge degree, which I think is a common misconception. It's certainly something I was really anxious about when I was applying. So it's important to know that. You need integrity. I think if you're thinking of being a barrister anyway, that's likely something that you'll have. Interpersonal skills are really important because your clients, particularly at the criminal or family bar, will likely be relying on you in very vulnerable situations. It might be one of the worst moments of their life and you're there to help them. You need to be able to work under pressure. The bar is a very pressurized profession with tight deadlines, last minute briefs, things like that. So you need to be prepared to show that you can perhaps juggle different commitments, be resilient, and put the time in, put the work in. Demonstrating commitment is really important in applications for anything bar related as well, because the bar isn't easy to get into. There are quite a lot of obstacles. Even if you get pupillage, it's likened to sort of a 1 year long interview. And then even when you get tenancy, you need to be prepared to keep going if you've lost a case or had a bad day. But it is very rewarding. And I think once you get used, or certainly I found that once I was used to rejections, again, I'm sure none of you will get them, but I got loads of rejections. Once you're used to it, actually, it can become quite a good motivating factor. You can show commitment by exposing yourself to the profession, doing mini pupillages, marshalling, even solicitor work experience, pro bono work, or just showing up to court as well and seeing all courts are open and just watching a case. The fact that you're at a talk like this is also a good indication that you'll be able to communicate to an inn or to chambers that you know what a barrister is, what they do, and then you can speak in an informed way about why you want to do it. You, of course, need sound judgment because you'll be making decisions that affect others, good communication skills, and obviously good oral and written advocacy skills. If you are panicked that you don't have much oral advocacy experience, when I applied for an Inn of Court scholarship, I hadn't done any mooting. You can get experience like that in a lot of ways, whether that's participating in theatre at school or running a podcast or doing public speaking, giving presentations, that kind of thing. I think I actually mentioned that I worked in a school in some of my applications because I was talking about how managing a classroom really improved my oral advocacy. So yeah, if the bar sounds right for you, don't be put off, go for it. Honestly, it might be that you have developed loads of these skills without even realizing it. So I will talk briefly about pupillages and mini pupillages, because what pupillage is a bit of a mystery, I think, if you don't already know. As I say, a lot of my closest friends and family still ask me this all the time. So it's split across 12 months into your first 6 months, known as your first 6, and your second 6. So in your first 6, you're basically kind of operating like an apprentice, effectively. You will be shadowing your pupil supervisor, who will be a member of your chambers, and kind of learning the tricks of the trade from them and watching how they go about their work. But you might also be given bits of work to do, like maybe starting to draft some written work or assisting in court. Fundamentally, though, you're shadowing, learning the ropes, observing. Your second 6 months, often referred to as practicing with your L plates, you are on your feet, acting under your own name, which is exciting, but you'll still supervise. So you'll still be getting plenty of feedback and observation and things like that, whilst you start to build your practice yourself from the ground up and start to build relationships with clients and solicitors. It really does depend on your chambers as well in terms of how much advocacy experience you get in your first 6 or second 6, but that's generally how it works. And then you can undertake a third 6 if you've completed your 12 months pupillage, but you weren't taken on as a tenant at that chambers. You can do your third 6 with that chambers or a different one as well. Pupils are generally not going to be charged chambers rent or clerk's fees, and you are paid. The pay is basically an award. So your first 6 months, generally, again, it depends on the chambers, but are not taxed because they don't count as earnings. They count as a grant, as an award. Your second 6 months, which is sort of guaranteed earnings, so it will be the amount that you're told when you sign up, when you apply for the pupillage, are taxed. And you can draw down in the year before you start pupillage some money from your pupillage award if you want to help support you with the bar course and things like that. So the process of applying for pupillage, there are kind of basically 4 main steps. So all vacancies for pupillage are advertised on the Pupillage Gateway at the end of November every year. Not every chambers does recruit through the gateway, but most of them do. You can apply to, I think it's a maximum now of 20 chambers through the Pupillage Gateway, which, by the way, is free to sign up. You just put in your email, make an account. Yes, you can apply to 20 through the gateway. I think you can apply to as many as you want outside the gateway, but take it from me, better to do a couple of quality applications than apply for about 30 or, 25. Your written applications are to be submitted between January and February at the start of the year. And then the chambers will do a paper sift and decide who they want to interview from that. First round interviews generally happen in March. So my predecessor's notes say that around 10 to 20% of candidates on average get a first round interview, which is sort of often around 8 to 12 students for every one pupillage. In my experience, my second round interview at one of the chambers I interviewed at, there were 12 of us. So I think it does vary. If you pass your first round interview, or if they still are interested in you, there'll be a second round, which is generally in April, which is a smaller group, and then offer day in early May. I did 2 years of pupillage applications. In my first year, I applied to 13 chambers. It was kind of speculative because I didn't really know how the process worked. I would really recommend giving yourself kind of like a practice buffer year with pupillage applications so that you can learn from what worked for you, what didn't work for you, things like that. I applied for 13. I got 2 interviews, and that was it. So a lot of rejections. And then this year, I applied for 17. I got 5 first round interviews. If you want to do the maths of how many out and out rejections that is, you're very welcome to. I got 3 second round interviews, and then I got 2 offers and a reserve. So it isn't an easy road. It really does change kind of year on year, but getting into the process early and perhaps practicing early is a really good thing I would recommend. Things that you can do to help with your pupillage applications are mini pupillages, which also you can do if you're not sure the bar is right for you and you just want to get a better idea of actually what barristers do. So what are minis? They are a period often of a couple of days to maybe a week where you can go and shadow a barrister or barristers from a particular chambers and see their life, their cases, their clients, and really behind the scenes of what goes on in a barrister's life. It can really vary depending on who you're shadowing. I did one where the barrister was working from home the whole week, so I just chilled out in her home as she prepped a case. And I did one where we were in court every single day and I was sat behind them at the bench, which was really cool. It's really good to do in your final year of your degree. If you can. That's when I did my first one, but don't worry if not. I did most of mine in the latter half of my conversion course year. You apply by way of application form or CV, which we recommend should always be 2 pages maximum, and a cover letter, which should be 1 page maximum. And the cover letter should sort of go over things like why you want to be a barrister, why you'd be a good barrister, and why you're interested in the chambers you're applying to. Getting the answers to the first 2 questions nailed early on is a very helpful thing to do. You're basically asked in every application for everything ever to answer those 2 things. So scholarship applications, mini applications, and pupillage applications. So it's good practice. Your experience that you mentioned in this application does not have to be purely legal. It can just be relevant to the skills or the practice area that you're interested in. I think in some of my applications for mini pupillages and pupillage actually, I talked about volunteering with Student Action for Refugees at uni, which was not a legal volunteering role at all, but I talked about how that gave me an interest in sort of modern slavery and trafficking as an area. So you can use any experience from your life. Don't be put off if you don't have much legal experience. Your CV should be concise, relevant to the practice area, neatly laid out and interesting. Get someone to check the CV and cover letter for typos. Get a second person and a third person to check it. It's good practice and it's so easy to miss things. Uni careers teams are very good at that. Use them. Yes, and then when you're thinking about why you want to do a mini pupillage at that chambers, do have a look on their website at the kind of work they do, the kind of practice areas that they mention or emphasize above other ones. And just really think about what it is about them that applies for you and make sure you get that in there. The BPC I will go over quickly. So this is the bar course that I've been talking about, the vocational aspect that you have to do to become a barrister. There are some things that you have to do before starting the bar course, which I think this is really helpful to say because I did not know these and very nearly missed the deadline on some of them. 2 essential things are applying to a provider. So it's a very personal decision. It will not be important probably to chambers where you did your bar course. As far as I'm aware, it didn't factor at all in my pupillage applications. There are a couple of them, University of Law, BPP, the Inns of Court College of Advocacy. and City University are kind of the main ones. So have a look at their websites, how they teach the bar course, if you think it's going to suit you or be sort of more aligned with the way that you work, that kind of thing. If you do want to apply to ULaw, you can do it directly from our website, and you just need to do a short statement and give us your qualifications, and then hopefully you'll be invited to a selection event. And you have to join an Inn of Court. This is really important, and I didn't know this. You need to be a member of an Inn of Court by the time you start the bar course. I'm sure Jess will touch on it. You don't need to be a member by the time you apply for a scholarship, but you do before you start the bar course, at least 12 weeks before you start it. Once you've joined the Inn, you're a member for life, so you can't change. So it's worth waiting to think about, hear about scholarship outcomes before you apply. So what actually is the bar course? Well, it basically is quite different to a law degree in that it's much less subject-based, and there's quite a heavy volume of work as well, particularly given that you need to balance studying with pupillage applications, mini pupillages, maybe mooting, qualifying sessions at the Inn, and also just having personal time, which is so important because you should all be living your lives as well. As you can see from the screen, the bar course is kind of much more vocational than a law degree. And there's a real switch from academic study to practical modules. So it's sort of split in two. We have a two-part course structure. There is the knowledge areas, so civil litigation and criminal litigation, things like deadlines for bringing a claim or how you write a witness statement and how you submit it to the court, that kind of thing. And then there are the core skills that you need. So advocacy, witness handling, drafting, opinion writing, and legal research. ULaw teaches both parts at the same time, which I think is really helpful because it meant that actually a lot of the stuff I was learning in my litigation modules, I was putting into practice in my advocacy modules as well, which just really helped to kind of reinforce my understanding of it. We do have selection events at ULaw, which I've mentioned. It's basically an advocacy exercise where you prepare a plea and mitigation in 40 minutes before the event. You deliver it for 5 minutes, and then after there'll be an interview with a member of bar course staff, testing your sort of motivation and analytical skills. And there's also a chance to be considered for an advocacy scholarship. It's good practice, I think, also to do this because it's a good way to get into the habit of doing things like pleas and mitigation, which I had not done by the time I did my selection. Something to think about, which I will touch on very quickly, is a question that comes up a lot. As I've said, why do you want to be a barrister? You'll likely get asked this in all, if not most, of your applications. So if you have time, it's worth sort of finding a friend and going to the pub or coffee shop or something like that and getting them to ask you that question and just answering it as if you would your mate, you know, completely honestly, completely casually, and then build off of that, build off of the answers that you give and turn that into your actual answer, which should be genuine. Things to think about are, have you had any exposure to the profession? Do you know what a barrister does? What is it about the job that a barrister does that really appeals to you? If you've seen anything on a mini pupillage or in court, what was it that made you think, I want to do that? That drives me. I think I would enjoy it. Why did those experiences make you want to be a barrister? And what qualities of a barrister do you think you have? And where did you develop them? Things like, as I said earlier, theatre is always a good thing to talk about. Sorry, my slides being very slow. Funding the BPC, I will go through very quickly because I know it's something that can feel really, really daunting. Jess will talk about the Inns of Court scholarships. They are an amazing resource. I got a scholarship from Gray's Inn. I wouldn't, that was a huge turning point for me. It's kind of also like a good seal of approval that you'll be a good barrister. It's not necessary. I know plenty of amazing barristers who don't have scholarships, but that's a fantastic system, so worth looking into. You can also get advocacy scholarships from ULaw, which you can use alongside an Inn of Court scholarship to fund the bar course if you want. You could do the bar course part-time so that you could have a sort of steady income alongside it. And the kind of final option is if you do the bar course LLM, which is something that the University of Law does offer, then you're basically eligible for a postgraduate student finance loan, which is really helpful. The loan is up to, I think, £12,000. So it doesn't just cover the master's aspect, it can cover the BPC aspect as well. I should note that you can only claim that once. So if you do a conversion course and do an LLM with it, so a conversion LLM, and claim a loan for that, you couldn't claim it again for the bar course. So that's worth thinking about. The bar course that we offer as a full-time and part-time course, but must be face-to-face. So we don't do it via our online campus. A full course is around 40 to 45 hours a week, which is lecture and workshop time and independent learning, and part-time is 20 to 25, also lecture time and independent learning. Briefly, I mentioned the BPC LLM, which is the option you can do to get the loan. There are 3 ways that you can add the LLM aspect onto your bar course. The first is you do a dissertation. The second is you do optional modules. I think you have to do 2, or you can do some pro bono work throughout your bar course year and write a reflective piece on it. I should say it doesn't get in the way of actually learning the bar course, because you still do the bar course in the time that you would normally do it in, and then it's just an extra few months, on I think 6 weeks after you finish that you would do the other thing. So it doesn't get in the way. And as I say, you're eligible for funding. We offer the bar course from these locations, so Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, London, Manchester, and Nottingham. And if you are interested, then please do have a look at our website. We do open days quite often. We have loads of virtual events as well that you will be advertised on the website that you're welcome to join. And if you want to sign up for our on-demand platform, we have loads of nearly 80 videos kind of talking about interviews, differences between barristers and solicitors, different chambers and things like that. So you can sign up to vod.law.ac.uk. I'll put that in the chat to get a free login if you're interested. Thank you very much for watching. There's the QR code again if you would like it. And as I say, feel free to email me if you have any questions going forward. Sorry, that took longer than I thought it would, Jess. I hope that you...
I thought it was excellent. I thought it was really, really comprehensive. Yeah, I feel like I wish when I had started working at the Inn a year and a half ago, I had had that presentation because I came to this job not from a law background. So I thought that was, really, really great. I'm going to try and share my screen now and hope that we also don't get my presenter notes. So if someone could just tell me that that's showing up okay, that would be great.
No notes.
No notes, ideal, great. Okay, cool. So yeah, hi everyone. My name is Jess. I'm the outreach coordinator at Inner Temple, so one of the Inns of Court. So I'll talk a little bit about what the Inns do, and I'll talk about in a bit more detail about scholarships and the kind of experience that might be helpful to you. Some bits I'll gloss over because Joe has very comprehensively kind of covered lots of stuff, and I don't want to send everyone to sleep as well. So yeah, just to kind of reiterate that kind of route to the bar, as Joe's already kind of touched on, you've got your academic stage, your vocational stage, and then work-based training, so pupillage. Just the only thing I'd kind of add on to what Joe said is she mentioned it sort of in passing, but qualifying sessions while you're on the bar course, that's something that you do with your inn. So sometimes people think that the inns are a provider of the bar course because it gets a bit confusing because there's a provider called the Inns of Court College of Advocacy, but I have nothing to do with them. And our qualifying sessions have nothing to do with them. So it's a bit of a confusing relationship. And so if you feel like, oh my God, I don't understand the relationship here, I don't really know what's going on, that's fine. Most people don't. But just to let you know that things run alongside your bar course that are to do with your inn. So there are 4 Inns of Court. As you may have already gleaned, these are our lovely little logos. And so what we do as the 4 inns is broadly similar across the 4. Yeah, while my knowledge is about Inner Temple, obviously, these things fairly pretty much ring true across the board. So the inns kind of act as a bit of a professional home and community. As kind of Joe said, lots of barristers are self-employed, and so you might not necessarily get that kind of office feel and kind of professional community feel from where you work necessarily. So the inns kind of can help foster that. A large part of what we do is financial support, so scholarships, which I'll go on go onto in more detail in a bit. And then we're also quite crucial to the kind of education and training of barristers in training, and then once they are established practitioners as well. So that is to do with qualifying sessions that run alongside your bar course. If you talk to people who qualified as a barrister 5, 10 more years ago, they all talk about, oh, I had to do a lot of dinners as a student. I had to go to lots of dinners, had to go to London 10 times and have 10 dinners. When I started working at the inn, I don't come from a legal background. Didn't know any barristers at that point. I just was like, what? Dinners, what does that have to do with it? Had no idea what they were talking about, because that is the way that it used to be when you were a student. The thing that you did with your inn was you would go to dinners, you'd sit next to some barristers, you talk, and then you would go home. And it has changed in the last few years, so that now the things that you do with your inn alongside your bar course are actually educational, which I think is a really good thing. So qualifying sessions is what they are now called, and they are things, they're sort of sessions on things like advocacy, legal research, sort of social context of the law, that kind of thing. So workshops, lectures, other kinds of sessions. And that's a large role that the inn will play when you are a student on the bar course, that you do those kind of qualifying sessions alongside. And then also once you then perhaps obtain pupillage, there's also pupils courses as well to help kind of make sure that you're getting those key skills while you're doing that work-based training. Another thing that we do is that we have student societies, same across the all four inns, although the number of societies kind of differs. When you hear student societies, you probably think, yeah, we've got hundreds at Queen Mary, like I'm a member of this one, I'm a member of that one, I'm a member of that one. It's a little bit different for the inns. So in a temple, we have 4 student societies. So that's debating, mooting, the Drama Society, and then the Racial Equality Society. So you can tell with those first 3 that those are quite linked to people who then want to become a barrister. They're not the various range of quite silly student societies that you might have at your university. I was certainly a member of some silly ones when I went to uni. So those are all about kind of enhancing your skills. So at Inner Temple, our Drama Society in particular is very active. They do a show at the Edinburgh Fringe every year. So if that's something that you are interested in, that's kind of, something you can get involved with it in. And then there's outreach, which is what I do. So in terms of scholarships and financial support, so Joe kind of touched on this a little bit, but the bar course as a qualification is expensive. There's no escaping that. This is an expensive route to go down, and that, unfortunately is just kind of unavoidable. Obviously, as Joe's already mentioned, there are kind of ways to sort of leverage against those fees, and part of that might be, yes, combining the bar course with a master's, and then if you're eligible for funding via Student Finance England, then kind of taking out a postgraduate loan. But as you'll see, their bar course fees can go up to £20,000 a year, which is an awful lot of money. And if you don't combine it with the masters, then it's not eligible for postgraduate student finance. So you have to think really carefully about how you're going to fund that. And that's where part of the IN scholarships come in. So between the 4 of us, we kind of have around £6 million available each year for scholarships. So if you're not on a law degree at the moment and you're thinking about doing the GDL, the INS do offer GDL scholarships. We call them the GDL scholarships. Depending on what course you actually do, it might not be called the GDL, but if it's a law conversion course, then you can get an INS scholarship for that. So those are available, and bar course scholarships as well as funding at other points. Whether or not you get a scholarship, that is awarded purely on merit. So how good you are across the application form and the interview, and then how much you get is means tested. It's a little bit different to how, for example, Student Finance do it. So we look at the money that's going to be available to you while you're on the bar course and do some complicated maths that I'm not privy to calculate that kind of award. So to put it into context, at Inner Temple, if you were awarded a bar course scholarship because you performed excellently, but you had no financial need for it, the minimum amount we would give you then is £3,000. If you were judged to have the maximum amount of financial need, compared to the kind of the cohort of the people who were applying, then you would be awarded up to £20,000. So that's the kind of range. But what's important to kind of bear in mind is that an IN scholarship is probably not going to cover all of your course fees and all of your living costs for that year. So it's important to kind of have your eyes open when you go into that, if you're making that decision, that you might have to take a couple of years out and work to try and save some money. If you're fortunate enough to have parents or family who will let you live with them while you study the bar course, then that might be something that you can consider. What we don't want, people doing is kind of signing up and doing the bar course and not actually having the money, not having the means to complete it. So it is it is important to think about how you do that. But the IN scholarships are there, and I'd really encourage encourage you to apply, basically. Just conscious of time, so I'm just going to kind of move on a little bit. Just in terms of the timeline, so I'm not 100% sure where all of you are necessarily on your degree sort of programs at the moment and kind of where you sit. But if you were planning to apply and do the bar course next autumn, so in a year's time, you need to be applying for an Inns of Court scholarship now. So you have to do it like that year in advance. The bar course scholarship application window is open until the first Friday in November. That's the same across all 4 inns. We have the same kind of timeline. And that's the application form that you need to complete in that time. And then the interviews are in kind of February, March time. Varies from year to year. This year at INA, for example, ours in the middle of February because of where Ramadan falls, and we don't want the interviews happening during Ramadan. So that's important to know that you need to think quite far in advance. It's a feature of the profession, so that is really important. The scholarships criteria for all of the inns are on our website, so I'd really encourage you to go and look at those. At INA, our 5 criteria are academic performance, advocacy potential, legal comprehension and reasoning, professionalism and interpersonal skills, and a motivation to pursue a career at the bar. The kind of more in-depth explanations of those criteria are on our websites, and they do differ from inn to inn. You can only apply to 1 inn for a scholarship. So that's really important to bear in mind. And as Joe already said, you don't have to be a member of an inn to then apply for a scholarship. If you apply for a scholarship and you get it, then you have to join that inn. So if you decide, oh no, I want to join an inn because I know this is something that I want to do, I know which one I want to join, you need to know that if you've joined that one before you apply for a scholarship, you have to apply for a scholarship at that inn. So my personal advice to people, generally speaking, if you're not 100% sure of which inn, or you don't really mind between the 4 of them, apply for a scholarship, see if you get it, and then join. If you are really keen to be involved in kind of student societies and that kind of thing, then that might have an impact on your decision in terms of joining earlier. There is a benefit there if you want it, but there's also no pressure, and it certainly has no bearing on the scholarship outcome decision as well if you're already a member. How you demonstrate perhaps your involvement and your commitment to the career and the profession from being a member, how you do that on an application form is kind of up to you, but simply just being like, yeah, well, I'm a member, that doesn't do anything. Lots of people are members. So yeah. And then the timeline for the GDL scholarship is slightly different, so you don't have to think quite so far in advance, but still reasonably far in advance. So if you were going to do a law conversion course this time next year, then you would be applying in kind of springtime, March, basically, for a GDL scholarship. I won't kind of talk too much about this. I think Joe's covered it really comprehensively, but I will kind of say that there is a growing employed bar in terms of barristers who are not self-employed and sitting within chambers, but are employed in larger organisations. So for example, the Crown Prosecution Service, government legal department, so depending on kind of where you might sit in government, they do employ lots of barristers, and solicitors too. So yes, there is work there, and the employed bar do also offer pupillage as well. So that is also something that you could look into. As Joe said, it is a competitive process. So you may well suffer setbacks, and that is just part and parcel of it, that you need to be resilient. And barristers who have been in practice for 30 years will tell you, I'm still getting rejected now. You can't win every case. It's not like a TV show where you're like, I'm only going to defend the innocent people and I'm going to win every case. That's not how it works. So yeah, sometimes, losing and facing that rejection and those setbacks. So those setbacks is just a part of the profession. What is quite important is that kind of academic success is quite a significant indicator of success at then kind of future stages, so scholarships and also pupillage. So of those who obtain pupillage, around well over 90% have at least a 2-1 in their law degree, and so that is something to bear in mind if you're looking at things like trying to go into kind of commercial law or chancery law. There's a much higher percentage of people who receive firsts in their degree kind of getting success at pupillage. It's not the only indicator of success. There is a lot more that goes into an application, but it is important to bear in mind that kind of intellectual ability and being able to demonstrate it is important to scholarship interview panels and also pupillage panels as well. So determination, resilience is really key, kind of work experience, and then additional work experience, whether that's voluntary or paid, is really important. I think my next slide is just kind of like talking us like some of the things that you could do to add to your CV and kind of add to the things that would beef up an application, basically. And kind of the main thing I suppose I want to say is that, like, if you have a part-time job now that is not related to the law at all, like you work in a coffee shop or you're like a care home assistant or you like work in McDonald's, you work in an SU bar, those are all things that you can talk about as long as you're kind of addressing your transferable skills. I think what's really important to remember is that this idea of kind of barristers as it's all this intellectual ability, all this academic ability, that is true, but then also most of what they are doing is working with people, and so your communication skills, how you work with others, are really, really important. And so if you are used to dealing with difficult customers in your job, then that is something that will stand you in good stead. And it's just being able to kind of articulate that in an application to say, these are the things that I do in my job, and these are the things I've learned, and this is how I think it will transfer to a career at the bar. That shows also a demonstration that you understand what a barrister is and what they do. So that is really important. Just because of your part-time job, you're not able to do lots of mooting competitions or do mini pupillages, or you're not getting many pupillages when you apply, there are other things that you can mention. Attending webinars like this or other kind of events that the INS and other organisations run are a good way to try and develop that understanding of what a barrister does. So you can talk about that as well. Just to say as well, sorry, Lydia does have my slides, so these will all be circulated round as well. I just wanted to also do like a shameless plug, I suppose, that we have some upcoming events at Inner Temple. So we have an online Insight event on Monday the 21st. So if you register for that but you can't make it, the recording will be circulated afterwards. And then we have an in-person event on Saturday the 26th of October. And so those events don't just feature me banging on. They have people who actually know what they're talking about because they're actually barristers, talking at those events about kind of their journeys to the bar and kind of advice that they would have for others. So hopefully that's kind of useful to you. Again, these will be sent around so you can book onto them afterwards. And then I've also got some QR codes as well. So we do have a kind of email newsletter that goes around maybe kind of once a month, every other month, just kind of keeping you up to date on the various events that we're doing, and kind of upcoming scholarship deadlines, that kind of thing. And then we also have a career guide on our website as well, which might be helpful to kind of look through and get kind of a sort of more holistic overview of everything that the INS do. I'll also just say as well that the INS do offer things for non-members, so depending on where you are now as well, there are kind of things that you can apply for. So for instance, at Inner Temple, I run a program called the Pegasus Access and Support Scheme, and so that's aimed at people from non-fee paying schools on course for a 2-1 and then who meet kind of other socioeconomic eligibility criteria, and so we've got our cohort for this coming year, but perhaps if you're a first or you're a second year, you could apply for that kind of in spring next year. And that if you haven't had many mini pupilages, we arrange a mini pupilage placement for you, pay for travel and accommodation if necessary, depending on where you're based, and then have a kind of skills development sort of program as well running alongside that for an academic year. So that's just one example. The other inns also do other things. Middle Temple have something called Access to the Bar. Grays do their kind of university advocacy days. And off the top of my head, I can't remember what Lincolns do, but they definitely do stuff. So don't take that as me disparaging them. But yeah, very, very happy to take any questions. Appreciate, however, we may have overwhelmed you with all of that information. Yeah, hopefully that was an okay whistle stop tour of the inns. It can be pretty complicated to wrap your head around. So.
Thank you very much, Jess, and thank you, Joe, as well. Really appreciate such thorough insights. It's a really interesting session, so thank you very much for sharing all of that information. I'm just going to stop the recording. So the recording